This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Greta Harris, the president and CEO of Better Housing Coalition. For many years, Greta has led Richmond's region as being the largest nonprofit developer of affordable housing. With that intro, Greta, I am honored to have you here and welcome to the Changemakers podcast.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm really happy to have this conversation with you.
So, Greta, are you familiar with the Changemakers platform? And were you able to take a chance or look through some of the prior podcast guests? I'm kind of curious because we found you in such an interesting way, and I'll get to that in a minute. But before that, tell us a little bit about Changemakers because this is a curious point, like how we find you, what you know about us.
Well, I think you all found me, and I'm embarrassed to say I had not heard about the podcast before the outreach. But once I went to your website and I started looking at your previous recordings, I was like, oh my goodness, I know a lot of people that have been interviewed by you. And then I listened to some of them. And, the affordable housing world is actually pretty small, compared to, global dynamics. And so I just saw so many of my friends, that did such a great job, and so they set a high bar, and I hope I can do likewise.
Well, welcome and thank you for taking the time here. We do a lot of research into who comes on the podcast. Obviously, it's called Changemakers, and we're really trying to find innovators and leaders in the field. So, we found you by actually looking in what was happening with Richmond. We were very curious, and of course, that led us directly to you. So, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what Better Housing Coalition does? Like, who are you and what are you guys doing?
Well, thank you for that question. Better Housing Coalition, or BHC, is a 37-year-old nonprofit organization that started out as an advocacy nonprofit by two really deeply rooted Richmonders who were so concerned about the quality housing choices that their neighbors had. And so Carter McDowell and Mary Tyler Cheek McClanahan came together with a simple idea to make sure that every Richmonder had good housing options. And from that small seed of an idea, we've evolved into a nearly $500 million organization that has invested in our community. We develop and sell affordable and mixed income subdivisions. We build and manage and own affordable rental communities. And I think the thing that is a differentiator for us, we offer an array of comprehensive services to the thousands of residents who honor us by living in our communities to really help them realize their fullest potential and can thrive. And a success metric for us is if people um, elevate their economic mobility pathway in such a manner that they don't need our affordable housing anymore and they can move up and out. And we see that as a great success. We have about 80 employees who reflect the communities that we serve. We have a dedicated, engaged board of directors. We have a separate board of directors for our property management company, a separate board of directors for our holding company, and we have a very active young professional board of young leaders who are supporting the mission and our organization. I love this place. I enjoy so much the challenges that we have on a daily basis, but we are trying to make a positive difference in a community that we love
Mhm.
to unleash the talents and gifts of every neighbor that lives here.
Mhm. You mentioned Richmonders. I think I didn't know that's what your guys' names, what you how you called yourselves. What are some of the unique challenges of the people who live in Richmond? Like, what have you seen happen to the housing market? What have you seen happen to the supply and how things are, trending? What's going on in that realm?
Well, there's a historical challenge, and then there is the current market challenge. And so, from a historical standpoint, Richmond is sort of rooted in the beginnings of our country's democracy. 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, we could go to St. John's Church where Patrick Henry gave the Give Me Liberty, Give Me Death speech. 10 minutes from where I'm sitting, we could go down to the James River where the Haxel and Kanawha canals were designed by George Washington.
Hmm.
And 10 minutes from where I'm sitting, we could go to what is known as the Devil's Half Acre, where almost a 500,000 enslaved Africans were sold into slavery. So we have a rich and complex history here in Richmond, um, where not every individual was seen as being equal to someone else. And those even though we were founded, on the principles of this country that are so wonderful and we're still aspiring to perfect, they didn't necessarily include you and me, Katie, when they were initially created. And so we that historical challenge um, changes the psyche of a people sometimes, and we can look throughout history from those early days of the Revolution to the Civil War to Jim Crow, to even some of the challenges that are going on in our current political environment that do not create full opportunity access for certain individuals in certain communities. And the profile of those communities that haven't always had a level playing field include lower income communities and communities of color. So that's part of the historical challenge that that spills over to conditions today around educational access, healthcare access, quality food access in those communities. The current market challenges are ones that are not unique to Richmond. Ever since COVID, in I guess 2020, we've seen the cost of everything go up from land to building materials, labor costs, taxes, property insurance, etc. And we are still trying to stay true to our mission to serving modest income households, but the cost of delivering a quality product at an affordable price is becoming more and more challenging these days. And the margins that we used to enjoy prior to 2020 have gotten uncomfortably thin. And I think, again, it's not unique to Richmond or to the Better Housing Coalitions. We belong to several national organizations, so we talk with peer housing groups across the country. And I think everyone is struggling right now on how to do this work in a sustainable way for the corporation so that we can be
Mhm.
around long term to be able to serve as many people as we can.
Mhm. So, there may have been a time when Richmond was average affordable, and it sounds like expenses of costs and everything has been really going up, impacting not just you guys organizationally, but impacting who is trying to buy and who is trying to rent and how much. And a lot of cities that typically haven't struggled with this are currently struggling with this. Um, you know, I've always said affordable housing is like it's good economic policy. Like it is a subset of a larger conversation about economic policy. And that could translate into the individual's economic situation and the city, the state, and then you can expand from there. Um, you mentioned that you're seeing a lot more people who are experiencing some of this economic volatility. One of the things I noticed that you guys do is workforce housing. So,
Mhm.
and really probably, addressing a segment of people who may not have already been at the table prior to 2020 or, prior to these changed times right now. How is that rolling out? How does that look, when it relates to workforce housing?
So I think there are a couple of different dynamics that are going on with us. One, uh, I think Richmond was the best kept secret for a long time, and now in the last decade or so, people are discovering what we've known for a long time, that Richmond is a great place to live, work, and play. And even before the pandemic, we started having migration from the West Coast, from the Northeast, coming into Richmond as just a cool place to live. The quality of life for most is really, really high. We have lots of amenities here. And it was compared to, say, a DC or Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, definitely anywhere in California, we were a bargain economically for housing prices. Um, and we also have a very diverse economic base with, I think, 9 Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. We are the state capital. We're 90 miles away from Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of economic diversity, and we have growth happening in that area. Like CoStar is really leaning in and having their corporate headquarters here, and is going to be ultimately hiring, I think, 4,000 people to work there. So we have a lot of influx of people coming in, and that begins to impact. Um, supply and demand, because we were growing, but not at a huge clip. But when we look regionally, Richmond's population is increasing at a nice clip these days. So that puts pressure on the supply demand side.
Mhm.
And then when you look more globally, since the Great Recession, 2008, 9, 10, we lost a lot of building capacity as a country, and we really haven't fully recovered. And so we are short in our region almost 40,000 units of affordable housing. That would be workforce and deeply affordable housing, to really meet the needs of the individuals who enhance the quality of life
Mhm.
for our community. And I'll give you an example. I guess it's been a year now, we ended up doing a tour with the CEO of Altria, which is one of our biggest Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. And um, Altria has been really, really good to the middle class in our region. They are a good employer, they pay well. And the CEO asked me, how many Altria employees do you think would qualify to live in your communities? And I said, probably none, because the company pays so well, even their lowest paid employee would be over income for most of our communities. However, I said, each of your employees is impacted by the people who live with us. So the individuals who are taking care of your employees' children at childcare, the individuals who are helping your employees take care of their aging parents, the individuals who are serving coffee, wonderful meals, local brews and distilled spirits to your employees. They live in our community. The folks who are entertaining your employees on the weekends with live bands and other artistic endeavors, those are the folks who live with us. And I think for every community, it's not a either or, and unfortunately, that happens a lot with gentrification, that the very people who create the culture of a region get pushed out when a community becomes a hot real estate commodity. And so I think it's a policy decision that we need to make as a community, that we want longtime residents as well as newcomers to be able to live in harmony with one another. That's sometimes easier said than done, but from the Better Housing Coalition perspective, we try to create mixed income communities. We have some developments that are 100% affordable, primarily using low income housing tax credits for financing. There are other developments that we've done that use a variety of financing tools where we can have mixed income communities, both in the rental side as well as the homeownership side. And we honestly believe, as a value, that inclusivity is a good thing to shoot for, not always easy to implement, but, whether it's racial inclusivity, whether it's socioeconomic inclusivity, that we do better living in harmony together, and we learn from one another, and it lifts up our humanity, that we have so much more in common than we do apart. The current political environment sometimes thinks that we're miles apart, but we have found that we have a lot of commonality, and we need to be in close proximity to one another in order to discover that sometimes.
So, if you're going to start building in a neighborhood and the community is not thrilled with the option of you potentially building there, and I'm throwing out a hypothetical here, but it's something that is a lot of communities continue to be confronted with. Um, what's the process by which you go as a nonprofit developer and an existing local company on in the ground, right, in the neighborhoods already? Like, how do you go about that, process of showing why it's needed and making it a successful new build in the community?
Well, we should be having adult beverages while we're having this conversation. It's, it's we have probably had more failures than successes on that front. And what I will say is that in today's environment, the awareness is at an all-time high that we have a problem in this country and in our community. There isn't enough housing that's affordable across
Right.
socioeconomic spectrums, and so most people, when you look at the various surveys that have been done, are for affordable housing as long
Mhm.
as it's not in my neighborhood, which is the
Right.
quintessential
Yeah.
definition of NIMBY, not in my
Yeah.
backyard. And so when we have an opportunity, either we've been invited by someone, it could be a faith institution, or it could be a neighborhood group, or we just find out an opportunity in a particular neighborhood. We believe in community engagement and transparency, and we approach that engagement from a point of education, because in many cases, people don't know what we do, even though we've been here for almost 4 decades. And there are assumptions that what we produce is the thing that scares people,
Mm.
which is public housing. The
Mhm.
excuses that we hear as to why individuals don't want us to invest in their community is that they don't want crime in their
Right.
neighborhood, and I don't know of anyone that does. They fear that the property values will decline, and there have been so many academic studies that prove that a
Yep.
well-designed, well-constructed, well-managed property only
Mhm.
helps to appreciate values. Um, and I think what is mostly driving the pushback is fear of change. And so when you're introducing the concept of someone that may be moving in that has a different life story, has a different lived experience, that makes people nervous. And as a human species, we don't like change. We don't embrace it. Most people don't, anyhow. And I think what we have shown because of our longevity in this region, that the fears that people had at the beginning of a process really never unfold. And the selling point that we issue, and we do tours, we take people around to show them our work, and some of the best comments are, "This is not what I was expecting," when they see beautifully landscaped properties and people that are happy there and engaged in social activities. Um, we tr because we develop, we own, we manage long term, and we are a long term asset holder. We just don't build it and then flip it and sell it. We're there for the long haul. If there is a problem, and sometimes, to be honest, there are issues that pop up, but all we have to do is be made aware, and then we take care of it because we're here, we aren't going anywhere, and this is our community too. So we want to be seen as an asset, and sometimes taking liabilities in neighborhoods and turning them into something very positive that's beneficial not only for our residents, but for the surrounding neighbors of our assets.
One thing I read about you, and I'm going to quote it so I don't mess this up, but the Better Housing Coalition's values say that we do what's right and not what's easy. And that really impressed me because there's so much life experience that we want to be cozy, we want to be comfortable, we want to be safe. And ultimately, at our human core, we do want to be safe. But you're in an environment where you clearly just talked about how difficult it is to not just, find a good neighborhood, build a good product, maintain it, but to integrate within that community as well. So, give some examples of how that value is playing out with what you're doing on the day to day, whether it's a person's life or it's a specific project you're doing. Give us some examples of those values playing out.
Yeah, I can tell you, one of our latest properties, Horner Run, is a partnership with the Chesterfield County Community Services Board. And we have a few of our apartments earmarked for individuals with disabilities, so that they are integrated into a broader societal setting. And we were leasing up, and the clock is ticking to meet investor returns on meeting those stabilization goals. And we had an individual who was so excited to move in. This would be the first time that he was able to live on his own with supports from his family and his and the Chesterfield Community Services Board. And when he moved in, um, he had some challenges in adjusting to being on his own, and had some early incidents with his neighbors. And had to intervene with the community services board, his family, and our resident services coordinators to be able to, one, talk with his neighbors to help them better understand this individual's capacity, and to be able to ensure their safety as well, in living in close proximity. But what we ended up doing is just creating a community table where everyone came together, including the individual who had some challenges, to be able to have a handshake and agreements on how we were going to be in community together. The easiest thing to have done is to say that this individual um, shouldn't live in this community and to help him to exit. But I think There has been greater understanding for some of his neighbors on him, and they've engaged with him now. So that is working out really, really well.
Mhm.
And sometimes we all have to take a little extra time to get to know individuals so that we can be supportive of one another in community.
Mhm.
Another example would be where we took a pretty terrible property. We've done this a few times, and it is stressing staff out and other people out. A property that I would say is a liability in a neighborhood, and we're investing close to $30 million into that property to take something that wasn't so good and make it much, much better for the hundreds of residents that are there. And uh, what we have found is that there were a handful of households that were causing fear and causing chaos for the entire community. And so we worked in partnership with the local police precinct and other residents who were fearful of these households and the court systems. And it took 4 months, unfortunately, because of the backlog in the court systems to remove a handful of people that were causing chaos in order to create harmony for the whole. And in that process, we ended up having to get security, pay for security on the site, and all of that. And this is not sharing. It's not showcasing BHC in the best light, but it's the reality of doing owning and managing
Mhm.
lots of, affordable housing. You sometimes have not good players that live there.
Yep.
And our goal is, when we do resident surveys, the number one answer that we get, why do people want to live in our communities? It's safety
Mhm.
was number one. Belonging is number two. Affordability is number three. And then amenities is number four. And so we take that seriously of creating a safe environment where kids can feel free to play, outside and not be worried, and that parents won't be worried about the well-being
Mhm.
of themselves or their kids. Um, and I think part of this is, in the current environment where we're waiting to see what the congressional budget may or may not look like, and the potential of America's social safety net on food supports, education support, childcare support, healthcare support, and maybe even rental assistance is in question. We've been doing a lot of scenario planning here and really building up our financial war chest, cutting all non-essential spending, and getting ready for what we think may be a really tough period, as we go into 2026, so that we're as well prepared as we possibly can be for living that value of doing what's right and not um, what's easy. We have almost 1,000 extremely low income seniors whose
Mhm.
average income is less than $14,000 a year.
Uh-huh.
And if rental assistance is cut, are we gonna put 80 and 90-year-olds out
Right.
because, that their subsidy didn't come through?
Mhm.
So I think we're trying to live by that value in every way, and I love that the board uses the values as a beacon as we're making tough decisions around corporate sustainability. And
Mhm.
honestly, I have a 4-page job description, and I can put all of those things I'm supposed to be doing in 2 buckets. And the first and foremost is corporate sustainability for BHC. And then the second bucket is greatest impact possible. But
Mm.
as you well know, you can have the best mission in the world, and
Mhm.
if you can't figure out how to keep your doors open,
Right.
you can't fulfill that mission. And so it's gonna be an interesting period right now that I think will be different for our industry on how we carry out the work. And I think we are beginning to explore not moving away from the mission in any shape or form, but reimagining how we might do this work differently as we move into the future because the old model, because of the cost increases and trying to stay true to who we serve, is not working so well anymore. The gaps went from hundreds of thousands of dollars on a capital stack to millions of dollars
Right.
on the capital stack, and it's getting more and more challenging just to get a project from ideation to fruition.
Mhm, mhm. A couple of things. I got uh, one, the lease enforcement. I like to so to kind of defend your point as far as what the it was a great example, but you said it may not put you guys in a great light. But I want to counter that with saying lease enforcement is lease enforcement, regardless of whether it's affordable housing stock or commercial. You know? So, kudos to you, though, for paying attention to lease enforcement because you can't address the larger community, the property improvements, how the property functions without doing exactly the framework that you laid out. Looking at the lease, having security, valuing the community as a whole's safety. And so, even though it was a rough example that you had to go through and try to address, again, lease enforcement, regardless of what the portfolio is, right?
It absolutely is,
Mhm.
and there's a social contract when that lease is signed. We will create a safe, enjoyable place to call
Yep,
home, and in exchange for that, you're gonna live by the community rules and pay that rent. And when that social contract is broken, um, and I think that falls into 2 categories. Sometimes life happens, and we know that, and that's why we have our resident services that work in partnership with our the folks who live in our community to help them navigate when those challenges do pop up. And we try to do creative problem solving in order to keep them safely housed in our communities. That's one scenario. There are other places where people are not, being a good steward of living in
yep,
community, and they don't follow the rules, and I think we have, waiting lists on all of our properties. So if someone isn't willing to pay
yep,
what they owe,
right,
or they're not willing to follow the rules of community, then when they exit, there are many more people who just want the opportunity to
correct,
find that safe, quality place to call
correct.
home. So, I'm an architect by training and practice, and I used to think that architects were the end all center of the universe, and then I realized whoever controls the money has a lot more power and control. Um, but I love doing real estate development. It wasn't until I got to Better Housing Coalition that I learned about property management
Mhm.
because I would do developments and move on to the next one. It's a horse of a whole different color when
Yes,
the decisions that you make from design, from construction
yes.
material selection, resident selection criteria, all of that, those early decisions make a world of difference in the success or not on the long-term operations of those properties. And property management is not for the weak of heart,
It's not.
but and really my team doesn't let me get involved, but so much because I'm too much of a softie. When residents do get my phone number and call me, I muck things up sometimes. But I think we have a good balance between being empathetic and supportive of our residents, but also know that we are running a business that happens to have a heart, and we want to be here for the long haul and serve as many people as we can.
Mhm. Well, property management, it's very difficult because 'cause you're dealing with people. You're dealing with properties, you're dealing with the process, and you're dealing with systems. And all of that just kind of can pop up and down at any moments. I feel like property managers, they show up for what they think is a great day. And, you know, one literal dumpster fire
Yes.
can change the
Literally
whole
and
day. Yes.
figuratively, it certainly can, and
Yeah.
they're really the unsung heroes
Mhm.
in our, organization because they are on the front line of dealing with the good, the bad, the ugly
Yeah.
of what, people are dealing with, and I have the utmost respect for them, and,
Yeah.
there is a trend that's happening in our affordable housing industry where some of our colleagues are sort of throwing up their hands and doing third party property
Mm,
management.
mhm.
And that has crossed our minds from time to time too. But ultimately, we believe that we can support our residents better by maintaining our own property operations,
Mhm.
integrated with our resident services so that they have a better experience in our communities, and, but it is not easy,
Yeah.
but I think we believe that everyone benefits from us having all of those capacities in-house.
Mhm. And those wraparound services make the difference because you're able to leverage and preserve not just the asset, but you're able to say, okay, what's going on here in the unit, in the life, with the employment, healthcare, whatever those are, whatever is happening, because you want to stabilize more than just the asset, right? You want
Right.
people to do better with this
Yes.
gift of affordable housing, if you will. I mean,
Mhm.
this is a chance for them to reframe what they're doing and where they're going, where they're living. So the wraparound services are definitely key in that continuum. One thing you were mentioning, and we were talking about the congressional budgets and the impact to rent subsidies. And the good news and the bad news is, the good news is affordable housing is on everybody's pitch
Absolutely.
right now. There is true bipartisan support, and we're not a political platform here. We're housers, and so many of us who have been here for decades kind of know how to maneuver with any congressional budget, because there's just always an education process. There's always an advocacy process. There's always a, best case scenario, worst case scenario. Where are we going to realistically hit? And so, this is just another one of those times. But what you're doing as an organization, as a nonprofit developer, really does rely on a lot of these low income housing tax credits and
Mhm.
what's happening in that space. And it's gone through some changes recently. Um, so tell us what you're watching, what you're predicting for the tax credit space, and how that may be playing out for you guys.
Mhm. So with the big, beautiful bill, there were a few things that were positive with the expansion of the low-income housing tax credits, the permanency of new markets tax credits, some procedural changes in the LIHTC program as well that were beneficial. I think that coupled with some other challenging aspects of that bill, including looking at the corporate tax rate, and that may diminish demand for tax credits. And when that happens, we're hearing that there may be a decrease in pricing for the tax credits, even though there may be more to be
Mm,
allocated. But
mhm.
if the pricing comes down, we're left with the same challenge of having these gaping gaps in the capital stack for new development. Since 2020, we've seen the cost of a typical unit of housing go up almost 65%.
Nah.
And it the amount of subsidy that we're raising philanthropically is just incredible. We just closed on and started construction on a $60 million development in Chester. Really cool project on the site of an old Green Book motel. It's going to be fantastic when it's done because of the legacy of that history. Um, was just incredible. And I think we had $6 million of, philanthropy. That's not including local, state, and federal dollars that we had
Right.
in it, but just philanthropic dollars. Richmond is a very generous, community, and they've been really good to Better Housing Coalition over the years, but it is getting harder and harder to fill multi-million dollar gaps, whether public or philanthropic sources. So right now, as the environment in which affordable housing is done, um, especially with the change in administration, we are spending this year reimagining how we fulfill our mission
Mhm.
at the board level and at the staff level. And so, kicking off this week, we are restructuring our portfolio operations to bring more efficiency and greater accountability to both our resident services and property management and maintenance teams, so that we can reduce expenses
Mhm.
and enhance our economic returns from the portfolio, which represents about 65% of our overall corporate revenue streams coming in. We are working with a couple of national mortgage brokers for commercial development, Berkadia and JLL, to help us remodel how we finance future projects beyond tax credits, because they're still oversubscribed here in Virginia, usually 4 to 1 of applications to
Right.
credits to be allowed. And we're spending, I don't know, 250 to $300,000 per application to be competitive in
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
process. So we're looking at alternative financing. We just got rated A by S&P Global as a company,
Congratulations.
which we're
Yes.
super duper excited about
Yes.
that, in hopes that we might be able to leverage donors who have been with us for 30, 35 years and offer them another opportunity to support our mission, but not just philanthropically, but
Mhm.
through an investment vehicle. So we have a subset of our board that's helping us to look at that structure for early 2026, with potentially issuing our own 501(c)(3) bond financing.
Okay.
And this month, we launch a very aggressive capital campaign. Which I'm almost embarrassed to say it out loud, but we're gonna be trying to raise $100 million of which will act as BHC equity, because that is
Right.
our weakest link in trying to facilitate faster, cheaper future developments.
Mhm.
And what I'll give an example. We finished up a project a couple of years ago in the Jackson Ward historic neighborhood here in the city of Richmond. And the reason that we can offer below market rents is because we keep our long-term debt down to about 25 or 30% of the capital stack.
Okay.
And then we have, LIHTC, whether it's 9% or 9.4 combo, equity coming in that doesn't have to be repaid, that usually is hovering maybe around 50 or 55% of the overall capital stack. And then the balance is subsidy that we get from the state,
Mhm.
local government, sometimes the federal government, and we still usually have a gap. So on this particular development, we had a $4.5 million gap. It didn't start off that big. It was much smaller. This was still in the tail end of COVID when it was under construction. And let's say we had a $800,000 gap and it took us 6 months to go out and raise the money. And then when we came back, the contractor said, I couldn't hold the prices. And now it's gone up
Mm,
another
right, right.
750. It went on for 2.5 years
Yeah.
to raise that money. So that was 2.5 years of delayed service to
Mhm.
residents.
Right.
It Every source of money had some strings attached to it, which added to the overall cost of the development. If we have success, or let me just claim it, when we have success in raising this
Yeah.
$100 million pool, um, we will be able to just write our own check,
Mhm.
and close the gap and get it done faster and cheaper and just fulfill our mission in a much more efficient way. We have a steering committee that we've assembled. We have a growing list of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals and that's where we're looking to raise the money,
Mhm.
not so much from corporations or foundations. And, really, we're pitching people's love of this community and wanting to make sure that all of our neighbors have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential and contribute to making our community even better. So I'm excited to try. All anyone can say is no, but we are fortunate as a community, and I think this is a replicatable idea. It's a different way of raising money with individuals where there's a lot of cultivation and stewardship, but I think the timing is right about the awareness of the need for more, not just affordable housing, but housing options, and that we're in a crisis stage and we want all of our neighbors to be able to be the best version of themselves. So
Mhm.
those are some of the things that we're trying to do to stay true to mission, but do it in some new ways as we go forward.
Mhm. And not be so subject to the, whims of congressional budgets too. So you are
Exactly.
creating a sustainable path by which you can keep going mission forward regardless of what's happening in the holes, right? And
Yeah.
I like how you explained the gaps in subsidy and the challenges to building. You explain those so well because so often people are like, we do wanna build our way out of this because there's been such a
Mhm.
historical gap on what has not been built. We haven't kept that pace up as a nation, but you explained it in such a way that says, even if we try to build our way out of this, look
Mhm.
at what's happening to put the deal together. And the longer it goes, more expensive it is, and the conditions and how that gap, that subsidy, that financing gap starts to keep happening, and why some people do push away from the table, quite frankly,
They
and
do.
they walk away from it. So, you guys are staying in the mix here.
We're staying in the fight, and I will say that our strategy is threefold, on the money. One is to do more shopping for properties, and really our target is Class B properties in high opportunity communities, and to engineer the affordability. So the properties may not be affordable, but it's a preservation strategy.
Okay.
And in communities that it would be very difficult for us to go in and build new because of NIMBY and
Mhm.
because of cost, but to buy existing properties, which is cheaper than new construction on a per unit basis these days. And then over time, even though it is illegal to discriminate for source of income, people do it every day, but we have always accepted voucher holders, assuming that that program is still gonna be around. We initially would start accepting voucher holders, and then for a larger property, let's say one that's 300 units, we would maybe subdivide it and take, 100 units through the tax credit program to bring deeper
Mhm.
affordability in high opportunity
Yeah.
areas. That's one strategy. Two, because we've been around for such a long time, we have deep, deep relationships with our local administrators and elected officials. And so we're in conversations right now with a locality about a 50-acre parcel of land in a great location that they're going to deem as surplus and that we might be able to get for either a significantly discounted price or for free to be able to do larger scale mixed income, mixed use developments um, in that community. And we're having conversations with multiple localities right now, trying to secure either declining assets like shopping centers that aren't doing really well, or surplus land in order to impact the overall development cost because our land acquisition is cheaper. And then
Mhm.
the third strategy is really trying to land bank a little bit along strategic educational, recreational, and transportation corridors. Um, in with the current administration, I'm not anticipating huge infusions of like transportation dollars coming to different parts of the country. But eventually that will happen again. And in Richmond, we have a bus rapid transit line that goes east west. We've just finalized the location of a north south line, um, and we would like to buy parcels along that line, even though it may be several years before that gets implemented. But we would have TOD or transit oriented development opportunities along that
Mhm.
line. We have a fall trail line that is 43 miles of recreation that will connect from Ashland down to to Petersburg. And so similar to the green belt in Atlanta, that's what the hope is.
Right.
I may not be alive to see it, but we wanna have strategic, parcels along those corridors as well, and wherever suburban new construction schools are going up, we'd
Mhm.
like to buy in close proximity to that for our homeownership subdivisions that we like to do. So, we have a strategy, all we need is money, and so we're gonna go out and, try. And like my grandmother used to say, nothing beats a failure but a try. And that's what we're going to do in trying to raise some capital and really scale up our impact um, to be able to serve more people.
Mhm. Well, we wish you well on that 100,000,000. It seems like you need to have one of those barometers in your office that just kind of
Yes.
hurts it so you can just kinda keep speaking at it and, moving that through. So, well, thank you so much, Greta. I appreciate what you are bringing to the table here and what you're doing in Richmond. And as we close out, any last words or projects that you want to highlight here as we close out?
Well, Katie, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share and to learn from you as well. I think we're at a crossroads as a country and as a society around how we are going to be judged for how we take care of the least of us. And I am hopeful. I've lived long enough and traveled enough around the world that there's way more good than not so good in this world. And I think there's a role for each and every one of us to do to put some light and joy and a helping hand out into the marketplace. It doesn't have to be helping thousands of people, but if we each take responsibility for trying to use our God given talents and gifts to help someone, if we all did that, we would lift up our communities and our neighbors in a very powerful way. And I think the future looks a little daunting right now, but if we just pull from the inner strength and light that we all have, I think we'll be okay. And as a nonprofit leader, I'm always seeing the glass half full. And I believe there will be light and joy in the future, even though it may be a little bumpy pathway to get there.
Mhm. Well, we are rooting for you guys and what you're doing at the Better Housing Coalition because, anything from the impact of the seniors that you were mentioning, who are on the extremely low, clear up to, preserving units, clear up to building new. I mean, you guys have a continuum to be able to impact um, more than just the development goals, but you have the
It's
ability to impact a person on an individual level by which they can then turn around and do the same for somebody else. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Just pass it on.
Yes, thank you, Greta, and Godspeed to you and the team at Better Housing Coalition, right?
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.